Welcome into episode 130 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
Can your iPhone get sick? Congress recognizes facial recognition and MySpace because it's 2006, apparently. Seriously, why MySpace? Find out on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. Just as Macs are prone to malware, so too are iPhones. The good news is it is a harder thing to have happen to iPhones, and for the most part, if you end up with something bad on your iPhone, you did it. That's not said to make you feel bad, rather it's said to let you know how easy protecting your iPhone can be. A piece from Digital Trends has AV Test CTO Mike Morgenstern conceding that yes, iPhones can get viruses. However, the practical hurdles are quite high, and it is unlikely for a normal user to get affected. But vulnerabilities exist that can be exploited by attackers. Then he goes through a few points. Primarily, malware is a bigger threat than viruses, since a virus is a specific thing, while malware is more of a catch-all term. Though even that one's not always accurate, since malware is a shortened form of two words, malicious software, and a lot of time the real vulnerability is wetware, aka the user. Not picking on you. I got a question, Mr. Trometer, pulling both from Mr. Morgenstern's comments and your own knowledge base. What makes iPhones safer than, I don't know. Let's start with Android.
You know, I do agree that virus is the wrong term, and honestly, I'm not quite sure what the right term is. A virus to me is like you're on a bus with a bunch of people and one of them sneezes, and now you've got the same virus. To stick with the metaphor, if you're an Android or iPhone user, you essentially have to ask someone to sneeze in your face in order to get the virus.
Now, wait, can I stop you for 1 second, though? Is that
Sure.
Is that true of Android as well? Because I mean, the thing about iPhone is you can only go to the App Store. Unless you jailbreak, you can only go to the App Store. And I know I'm probably getting ahead and going someplace that you're going to go in a bit. But with an Android phone, yes, you are encouraged to shop in Google Play Store, but there are other places. It's easier to get somebody to sneeze in your face, basically, with Android, isn't it?
It's much easier to get somebody to sneeze in your face. And, you know, the fact is that you can get apps from anywhere on Android, and that's the biggest problem with Android. It's just a philosophical difference between what Apple has decided to do and what Google decided to do. You know, Google wanted apps from everyone, which just sort of opened up this Pandora's box of problems. And Apple said, nope, it's only apps that we approve, which, you know, makes your phone a lot more safe. But, you know, some people would say more limited or at least, you know, has less opportunity to download the cool stuff. You know, basically the App Store does a much better job of policing their store. And while it's not 100% safe, it's much safer than Google Play or just getting your apps out there on the internet. You know, Apple reviews all of the apps and they review them with rigor, and they may miss a few things, but Google's review process is less rigorous, and with a few exceptions, and some that we've talked about here, it's really hard to sideload apps on iOS, where on Android, it's super simple. You just send somebody a file, they can download and install and run that app. In fairness, it's not that Google doesn't want your phone to be safe. It's just they've chosen a different philosophy.
Now, of course, none of that means that bad things don't happen to iPhones. Digital Trends points out there have been incidents where legitimate apps in the iOS App Store were infected with malware. In one case, cybercriminals were able to trick Chinese app developers into using a counterfeit version of an Apple development tool. Again, though, that started with fooling somebody into doing something which, had they been more careful, they'd have not had an issue with.
You know, the sources of malware are nefarious and despicable, and it's hard to trust anyone at this point. But I've said it before, the first line of security is you. So be vigilant and aware of what you're downloading and installing. That's the best advice anyone can adhere to.
Now, while the article starts with the question, can iPhones get viruses, it goes pretty quickly to the kind of things that we've talked about before, things like, don't jailbreak your iPhone.
Duh. Jailbreaking your phone is like leaving your car unlocked in a big city parking lot with the keys in the ignition. You're just asking for trouble. So don't do it. Plain and simple.
Can I ask a question? Have you always felt that way? Like 2007, before there was an app store, when, Steve Jobs was like, I got an idea, web apps. And everybody else was like, I got an idea. I don't want to say it on this show, but I mean, have you always felt like jailbreaking was the wrong thing to do? Or is it just as the years have gone on? I mean, with over 2 million apps in the App Store, probably you're going to find what you're looking for there.
I jailbroke my phone twice.
Okay.
And that was mostly just to play around and write my own app. Once I did it a couple of times, it just became so difficult because Apple was battling the jailbreaking software and the jailbreaking community. And it just became just a pain in the butt that I just stopped, because at that point you knew something was going on at Apple, and that something, which ended up being the App Store, was on its way.
Okay, so you're talking early days was when you jailbroke back in 2007.
Yeah, haven't done it since.
All right. Another piece of advice from Digital Trends, beware of phishing scams.
Yeah, this goes to what I said earlier about being vigilant. If a company is asking for your personal information, you need to be darn sure that you trust the company you're giving it to. This means everything from not clicking on links in an email to asking hard questions of somebody who calls you. Basically, always be asking, do they have this information already? And if not, are they really who they say they are?
Yeah, just picking your words a tiny bit there. It's not even, be sure that you trust the company, but be sure they're the company.
Exactly.
We've done stories before, and I did one, I think, last week on Mac OS X. Apparently, Southern California scammers are pretending again to be calling from Apple stores. And they found a way to spoof the number, so it looks like it's from an Apple store. And sure, I trust Apple, but do I trust that guy on the phone? Because even though he says he's from Apple, why is Apple calling me?
Right. And if they called you, why are they asking you for your phone number?
Right. Yeah. Little things. Another thing that they have, and this is a phrase that I was not aware of, beware of smishing scams.
I love that term. It's basically SMS phishing, so smishing. And I think that's just a great term. It's phishing via text messages. And you may receive what appears to be a regular text message from some big company. There's probably a link in it, and if you tap that link, you're redirected to a fake website, or you trigger a download to your phone. These kinds of messages take all sorts of guises, from tax refunds to security warnings, and you just need to make sure that you're clicking on the right thing, or even better, don't tap on it. Log in directly to that website or make a phone call. Make sure that, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, not what some text message says you should be doing.
Now, though this isn't in the article, it's worth revisiting profile installations as well. Just as Google and Facebook were abusing Apple's Enterprise Developer Program for iOS to harvest user data, other organizations, arguably more nefarious organizations, we can have that argument, they may walk users through installing new profiles so the user can have, access to porn or illegal gambling or other content that's not allowed in the App Store. Kind of permission given away, though, could be more trouble than the thing that you're getting is worth. Yeah,
let's say you want to have access to these services that Apple doesn't allow. I'm not judging, but let's say you want access to those services. What else is that app doing? That's the question you need to ask. What other parts of your phone is it accessing? What other data is it harvesting? And it may seem like you're making things easy on yourself with these profiles, but like I said, you really don't know what information is being harvested. The best thing to do is, one, just say no. If you're going to use those services, maybe a mobile phone is not the best place to do it. And two, check your profiles periodically to make sure there aren't anything there you might regret later. To check, you go to your iPhone settings app, tap on General, and look for something that says Profile and Device Management. If you don't see this option, then you're totally clean. You don't have any profiles installed. Otherwise, tap on that, Profile and Device Management, and you'll be able to see any profiles you have installed, and you can remove them from there if you don't want them.
Now, we talk every week about running a good anti-malware suite for your Mac. Are such things necessary for an iPhone? Or an iPad, for that matter?
Boy, that is a really good question. In many cases, your Mac, for example, recommending that someone install good malware detection would be a great suggestion. For iOS, I recommend everyone steer clear of them. And I'd also recommend you tell your less tech-friendly friends and family, parents, the same thing. The reason is that, one, most of the antivirus apps on the App Store are scams. They really are. We've seen all kinds of subscription scams where they're charging you monthly, and really those apps aren't doing anything, or even worse, they're stealing your data. And then two, Apple's App Store policies are such that any legitimate antivirus app will likely be so crippled in terms of what it can do that it's not worth having on your phone to start with. They place very strict guidelines on what an app is and is not allowed to do. Having access to the file system, which is something a file scanner should have, is not one of those things that they allow. So I wouldn't install any antivirus app on your phone. It just isn't worth the trouble that you're going to get from it.
A proposed law about which to tell you, TechCrunch says Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz and Missouri Senator Roy Blunt have introduced a bill designed to offer legislative oversight for commercial applications of facial recognition technology. The Commercial Facial Recognition Privacy Act would obligate companies to first obtain explicit user consent before collecting any facial recognition data, as well as limiting companies from freely sharing facial recognition data with third parties. Talking of the proposed legislation, Senator Blunt was quoted as saying consumers are increasingly concerned about how their data is being collected and used, including data collected through facial recognition technology. That's why we need guardrails to ensure that as this technology continues to develop, it is implemented responsibly. Now, two reasons this proposed legislation doesn't excite me. First, it doesn't cover any sort of government use, just commercial. And second, I don't trust companies to seriously inform consumers. Here's what part of the proposed legislation says. It shall be unlawful for a controller to knowingly use facial recognition technology to collect facial recognition data unless the controller A, obtains from an end user affirmative consent in accordance with subsection B, and B, to the extent possible if facial recognition technology is present, provides to the end user 1. A concise notice that facial recognition technology is present, and, if contextually appropriate, where the end user can find more information about the use of facial recognition technology by the controller. Now, I was at an amusement park recently, and they were shooting video at the park for some reason. It was a special event, and they wanted to promote it for next year. I don't know why. But there was a sign that said, if you don't want to be on this video, go around. Go a different way. And by staying here and walking past here, you've basically signed a waiver saying it's okay for you to use this video. Use me in this video, right? Now, I'm paraphrasing because I didn't actually see the sign. The person I was with saw the sign. I was looking at rides and the corn dog place and the lake that I was walking past at the time. Is that affirmative consent?
I'm not a legal expert. I don't play one on TV, but my gut tells me you are not affirming anything.
But I'll bet you are. That's the thing. Because I was there and I was looking around, so surely I must have seen... I don't know. See, here's the other problem I have. Like so many other consent laws, I worry that this either gets hidden or becomes the usual hurry up and click on the terms of service kind of thing, right?
Yeah, totally agree. I hate those kind of signs. I hate this sort of liberty that companies take with our likenesses. It used to be that photographers on the street had to walk around carrying basically documents that allowed you to sign off on your rights if they happen to get you in a photograph. Mm-hmm. And, this basically waives all of that. And it's crazy to me.
It's especially interesting when you're talking about something like like an amusement park or something like that. What we always say is if you're not paying, you're not the consumer, you're the product. Boy, oh boy, did I pay to get in that park. I'm just saying. Here's the question I have. Am I being too pessimistic in all of this?
I really don't think you are. I think, we really need to start defining what our rights are as consumers, especially now that there are lenses everywhere, not just on, the sides of buildings, but the guy next to you is holding a camera as well. So what are your rights as a citizen, as a consumer, as somebody who just wants to go on an amusement park ride?
I'm curious, are there worries or concerns that you have that I haven't? I don't guess I've brought up specific concerns, except that I don't know that, what else about this worries you, if anything, or have we covered it now? Well,
I think, first of all, Senators Schatz and Blunt, they really need to start their own substance abuse law.
I don't know what you mean, but...
Schatz and Blunt.
Oh, that's cute. Oh.
On the surface, this legislation hints that our politicians may actually have a clue. But you're right. It only includes consumer use. So the police or FBI or CIA or whatever government agency could pepper an area with cameras, apply facial recognition, and there's nothing we can do about it. And that to me is infuriating. This is certainly a step in the right direction, but it's not a big enough step. And I'd like to see more done to protect us. No offense to those in the UK, but they're subjected to hundreds of cameras per day in the name of safety. I'd hate to think we were heading down that road ourselves.
Now, interestingly, Microsoft has endorsed this bipartisan bill. Microsoft President Brad Smith wrote in December, "We believe it's important for governments in 2019 to start adopting laws to regulate this technology. The facial recognition genie, so to speak, is just emerging from the bottle. Sorry, but here comes my pessimism again. Just as you can't be a little pregnant, a genie that's just emerging from the bottle is out of the bottle." Now, it feels like all this does is give lawyers time to figure out how to fight the inevitable lawsuits and give PR departments a head start on writing their inevitable apologies. Is that... I hate to be so pessimistic, but I can't see how this helps.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. And look, I'm not immune to the idea of using technology to help me and my loved ones be safe. I'm not. It's really an easy thing to go, oh, wow, this might make us safer. But at what point do we cede our freedom and responsibility for that safety? And it's a big topic. And quite honestly, I'm totally ill-equipped to debate that. But I think this is a topic that's going to take a while to work out.
I had a MySpace account. You had a MySpace account. All God's children had MySpace accounts. Why are we talking about them 13 years later?
Doctor Who episode?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll find out why in a moment. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Next time you go to a coffee shop, look around. There are so many more Macs in use today than there have ever been before. And it seems likely there are just going to be more as the days go on. I notice the growing number of Macs. You notice the growing number of Macs. You got to believe that bad guys notice as well. They want your data. Protect it with MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for well over a decade. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. So, surf in safety with MacScan 3. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by SecureMac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. How does this happen? And I don't mean how is it that we're talking about MySpace. MySpace did something. And you may be saying to yourself, MySpace did something? How does this happen? But wait, it gets much worse. TechCrunch says MySpace may have lost more than a decade's worth of user music. And you got to be thinking that you've fallen through some sort of anomaly. You have not. We are seriously talking about MySpace in 2019. Here's what TechCrunch says. It's not as if the internet needed another cautionary tale about backing up data, but for many artists, this news is heartbreaking nonetheless. MySpace has issued a tersely worded message noting that a huge amount of user-uploaded music has been lost during a server migration. We're talking about as many as 50 million songs from 14 million artists over a 12-year period. How is this possible? Or is this even possible? Because here's the thing. I don't understand. I don't know what a server looks like. I mean, I know what a Mac Mini looks like. And so I know if you've got 10, you could run a server or something. Or if you've got 1, you could run a server. I don't understand. How can this happen?
Well, I guess the first mystery is there's still a MySpace.
I know. We were all very surprised. We were all very surprised to find that out. Seriously, though, this seems like a really poorly executed software update. Any engineering team worth their salt would have run the upgrade on a test server to make sure that everything ran correctly. Obviously, they didn't do this. Otherwise, they would have caught it before it happened. And they say that the songs are lost, but are they really? Or are they on a server somewhere with just all of the data links to those songs lost? If it's the latter, why can't they just roll back the software update? Like I said, it just seems like a really poorly executed operation. And I know that, they probably don't have the top of the tech talent at MySpace anymore, but this just seems very amateurish. Now, for the average John and Jane, this really illustrates, as TechCrunch pointed out at the start of the story, really illustrates the importance of having backups for your data. Can you go over some of the types available and what you like?
Sure. And, sometimes you listen to a podcast with a blowhard who pretends they know everything.
Hey, back off, buddy.
Well, sometimes I'm that blowhard.
Oh, okay.
But I'll come clean here. I got burnt once and I lost a bunch of my personal data. And ever since then, backups have been sort of an obsession of mine. There are a lot of different ways to do them. Here are just a few. First, you could do an external drive. Though you risk that drive being destroyed in whatever disaster destroys your primary hard drive. So, Time Machine, for example, is something that would use this, where you back up to Time Machine, but if your house burns down, then it gets both your Time Machine drive and your laptop or your computer. So, Time Machine really didn't help you out too much there in a monumental disaster like your house burning down. Then you can go off-site, which is similar, but the external drive is stored in a separate location. I actually worked a long time ago, worked for a company that, and this is before cloud backups and all of that stuff, but literally at the end of the day, they would back up everything onto hard drives, and then they would hand them to a guy who would then run it to the bank before the bank closed to put them in the safety deposit box, because there's not many places that are safer than a bank. And then the next day they would do it all over again. And that was their way of having offsite backups. And for a while, it worked for them. Then there's what's built into your Mac and Apple's ecosystem, such as iCloud. It's not really a backup solution as much as it's a good copy of your data, so that if you're working along, you save your document, and then all of a sudden your computer explodes, you've still got your iCloud copy of that data. Then there's other cloud services such as Dropbox, which do pretty much what iCloud does. They have their own spin on it, but again, not really a backup solution as much as just copies of your files. You've got Amazon's S3, and there are apps that will use S3 as a backup solution. So the app will be on your computer and will continually back up to S3. Depending on the app, you could have a fairly decent backup solution, but it tends to be clunky, and S3 itself costs money in addition to the cost of the app. And the bigger your backups get on S3, the more money it costs. And then there are third-party services that provide very robust cloud backups.
Let me ask you a question really quickly, because
Sure.
You made a distinction there that hadn't really occurred to me, the difference between a backup and safely storing your data. Like, I'm thinking about this brand new Mac that I'm looking at right here in front of me. Well, it's not brand new now. It's about 3 months old. But going into this Mac and using it exactly the same as my last Mac was as easy as downloading a couple of apps that I had to download from someplace else and signing into my iCloud account.
Yep.
And I've got all of my scripts that I've written all the way back to 2016, because that's what I had on my old computer. And then the rest of them are on a hard drive someplace else. But I mean, that to me feels like a backup. Talk to me about that distinction.
Sure. It is a backup, but it's a backup of only your most recent version of that document, where a good backup solution will allow you to step back in time. So, for example, if you had one of those scripts, you accidentally deleted it, and in a couple of weeks you said, "Oh my gosh, where'd that script go?" You're kind of stuck, and
it's gone.
It's gone. Whereas a really good, robust backup solution, you'd be able to essentially do a time machine thing where you go back in time a little bit to where you did have that document and make a copy of it and bring it forward.
All right, Mr. Paranoid, then what do you do?
Believe it or not, I use a combination of Time Machine, which is local to an external drive. I use iCloud, which is easy. And like you said, it's sort of like you turn it on, log in, and you've got everything that you had. Then I use a third-party cloud backup service. Backblaze is my choice, but there are many others, and they're all very good. And then I use Dropbox as well. In some cases, I have documents essentially backed up to 4 different services, and that doesn't even count code repositories like GitHub or Bitbucket, which essentially is, all of time for that particular code base. Is it overkill? Maybe, probably. But trust me, you never, and let me repeat, you never want to get that question from the wife about where a certain digital photograph disappeared to. And if I keep my backups up to date, I never will get that question.
Now, it is funny, and certainly we've made a lot of fun talking about MySpace, but 2006 to 2008, MySpace was forever. In the wake of the MySpace story, I've heard people say, YouTube will go away. And I hear it, and I think, no, it won't, because it can't, except, of course, it will. All things pass. iTunes, and iCloud will go away. Facebook will go away. They may outlive us, but they won't go on forever. The Facebook, by the way, I think people are just trying to make me feel better about that one. I don't think Facebook is ever actually going to go away, no matter how hard people hope. What's your suggestion for users or artists who are generating lots of content? Because, I mean, hand in hand with, struggling musician, well, they're hand in hand. Struggling musician. How much money are you going to spend on backups, especially if, XYZNet, which may actually be a thing. So I'm not saying them specifically, but especially if XYZNet's like, hey, store all your stuff here. No worries.
I love all of these services. Take away the controversy surrounding some of their data gathering and what they've allowed people to do, whether it be to put out videos that you made or music that you've created or just connect with friends and family that you haven't seen in a very long time. All of these services are just fantastic. But the thing you have to remember is their business model is not protecting your data. It's getting more users and displaying whatever the new hotness is. So I know this sounds paranoid, but never trust anyone with your data other than you. So if you write an awesome song or film a fantastic video, make sure you keep your own backup. That's the only way you're ever going to stay safe and to keep your data. Online services, they may not do it for you.
Even online services, that's what they're set up for. I was talking with Nicholas Tachek earlier this week, running down the list of examples that I just did. And he was like, hey, don't forget about Flickr. Flickr gave people a lot of time, to move their stuff. And then they actually extended it a bit and said, no, seriously, we are going to delete your photos, if this, then that kind of way. But I mean, even things that were set up to do that, even things that were set up to be that place for you. I mean, one day their remit may change. And like August said, you'll do better to have it backed up to something that you can actually control.
I know it wasn't digital and it was a long time ago, but the library at Alexandria was supposed to be the world's repository of information, and now we don't even know where it was located.
It was in Alexandria.
Okay, I'm talking street address here, pal.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. You'll find notes there for this show, for all the shows we've done before, and for shows yet to come once we actually get to them. securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.